when there we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's FFL homeowner webinar. I am Claire Mitchell, and I'm here with Dr. Michael Orphanides, and we are going to get our webinar started with a little icebreaker question. And my question is to you, what is your most useful hurricane prep tip? What's your one that you always go to every single time? So even though we've never lost water, we're up in Gainesville, our hurricane damage isn't quite as bad as the rest of the state. I always fill up two big 5-gallon jugs of water and I always get gas. And so that usually, and we have some like MRE, like camping food and stuff that I like to make sure is, oh, and wet wipes. That's what I like to make sure. So we're going to be kind of clean and we're going to have stuff to eat and we'll have something to drink for a little while at least. So those are my favorite ones. Let's see what else other people have said. Okay. Oh, what? We don't have any favorite hurricane tips? Come on, y'all. Okay, we got charge all the batteries, and that's a good one. Fill the gas and fill your bathtub with water. Ooh, a water bladder for the bathtub. Interesting. Okay, Gail, yes, Gail says buy your supplies well ahead of time. That is a great tip. I know the gas station that doesn't have the long line. So that's the one I always go to. Okay, someone else said camp stove with propane. Someone at the top said that there's terrible feedback. Is anybody else having bad feedback from the audio? Let me know, and we'll see if we can get that figured out before we get started here. Um, Barbara says she's going to hide in the closet because she's from Michigan. So, Barbara, good thing you're here. You're going to learn a lot today. We have safety light sticks, solar lights, and this is Barb. She lives in Sanibel. Okay, yes, the battery powered crank radio. That's a good one. We have one of those too. I got to find it though. So it's hurricane season. I guess I got to go find it. We say go shopping to top off the hurricane pantry. I like that. And you got to make sure you charge everything. You always think, well, I don't know what I always think, but I had some friends who went through Helene and my father-in-law did too. And just after that, it was just like, man, you really do, really the worst could happen. You never know. So all of these are really great. Um, I'm going to do a couple more and then we're going to get started. We have moving all your plants to a safe place. I like that. I always have to take down all my hanging plants and all of my potted plants. And the last time I counted, I had like 80 potted plants. So that's fun because we have freezes too. Make a hotel reservation out of the path in case you need it. And I'm going to do one more. Put all the patio furniture we can in the house. Some people put it in the pool. We'll ask Dr. Orphanides if that's a good one. I don't have a pool, but I always liked that. I always liked that tip. Okay, guys, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for all of your tips. If you are new to Florida, take note of this chat box, and also we're going to take note of this presentation here. So I'm going to get started. So my name is Claire Mitchell, and we are doing the monthly Florida Friendly Landscaping Homeowner Webinar Series. And this series is given every third Tuesday of the month at 11 o'clock. Today, we have Dr. Michael Orphanides, who will speak to us about landscape prep for hurricane season, including practical steps that homeowners should consider when preparing home landscapes for the coming storm season, which it's not coming. It's here, guys. It's here, June 1st. First, all of your microphones have been muted. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box instead of the chat box because the chat box is closed. And we will answer any of your questions at the end of the presentation. And we also have an exit survey at the end of the webinar, and that's going to give us an idea of how you liked our speakers, our topics, and lets us know how we're doing. Our next webinar will be July 21st at 11 a.m. and we will be joined by Michelle Atkinson. She's the environmental horticulture agent in Manatee County, and she's going to be talking about best management practices for your waterfront property. And I know that's a big one for a lot of people in Florida who live on canals and ponds and things like that. So today we're talking with Dr. Michael Orphanides. He's a certified arborist with the International Society of Arboriculture, and he serves as the Commercial Horticulture Extension agent for IFAS in Broward County. He coordinates Broward County's tree trimmer licensing pesticide application and green industry's best management practices certification programs. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us and take it away.
Good morning, and thank you, Clara. Hello, everybody. So, yeah, there's a lot to talk about with regard to hurricane season preparation, and hopefully some of you have been thinking about that already. Obviously, it is well into June, and we fortunately don't see the worst of our hurricane season for a little bit of time yet. So I think there is still plenty of time to prepare. There has been a lot of chatter about this being an El Nino year, and particularly a strong El Nino being predicted, which actually may have a dampening effect on hurricanes. But that doesn't mean we need to rest on our laurels and not worry about it. As I understand it, the primary reason why El Nino can be work in our favor is it tends to increase wind shear and make atmospheric conditions less favorable for hurricanes. But having said that, that doesn't mean we can't get one. And so I know there are predictions this year for, I think, slightly below normal. So time will tell. There's a lot of stuff to think about. I've lived in Florida almost 27 years now, and we've been through Hurricane Wilma down here in South Florida and Hurricane Irma. Wilma was a 2005 storm, kind of late October, and Irma came a little bit earlier in September of 2017. So I've been in through two of them now. We've had numerous brush bys, and just know that even afternoon thunderstorms with gusty winds can cause impacts that we would like to avoid. So it's not just a hurricane or a tropical storm. We can even have those kinds of situations and tornadoes that spin off of thunderstorms. So anyway, without any further ado, I want to move on. And if you look at this spaghetti map here. I got this from my good colleague Henry Mayer, who's down in Miami-Dade County. He found this in the archives of NOAA, but this goes way back even to the 1800s. But as you can see, the Florida Peninsula is frequently battered by hurricanes and tropical storms. And in fact, the part of the state that I live in, South Florida, is probably the bullseye in terms of the most frequent. Um, Having said that, I think we actually have been rather fortunate in that in the last 27 years, there's only really been two major storms that have impacted Broward County in a very big way. Um, so the time of year when we tend to see the storms heat up and become the most prevalent would be late August, September, and early October. Having said that, as you can see, there have been storms as early as June and some as late as not even October, into November. So season ends November 30th. So really, it's almost a 6 month window of time that we can typically think about having a hurricane. So I thought about this when I put this presentation together, and it will be heavily weighted toward tree care because I'm an arborist, and for all these years, we've had an ordinance in Broward County that has required licensing of our tree workers, our tree service professionals, regardless of where they're from. If they're working in the county, we required a license. I will let you know that the state of Florida's preemption of local licensing laws caused our ordinance to be rescinded last July. And so at this point, and that license was required, it was married to having a certification from IFAS Extension or being a certified arborist with the ISA. Good pruning is super important, and folks that don't practice good pruning or don't prune at all, I think, end up having more issues with their trees, more expenses, and potentially more damage. So preparing the canopy for storm season will be the bulk of what I'll talk about today. However, there are lots of things to think about, even beyond trees, when we think about preparing for a storm. So I asked myself, well, what is it we're really afraid of when the hurricane cone is coming our way? Flying projectiles come to mind. I'm sure you guys could add to this list. Roof tiles, excuse me, debris that's out there in the yard or in the roadway or whatever, falling debris, things that can come down on our roof or our cars. Of course, flooding, and some storms are wetter than others. Power outages is probably really up on people's minds, especially in the summertime when it's so hot and humid. Down power lines, of course, are a frequent issue with storms. And that, of course, is often because of trees that have failed. Blocked roadways, that's typically one of the first things that the communities try to deal with is opening up the roadways so people can get out or supplies can come in. Um, and of course, huge cleanup costs. My association, everyone was hit with a $2,000 special assessment in the aftermath of Hurricane Wilma in 2005, and that's never a fun thing to get a saddle with a bill like that. And I'm sure there are many others that we can add to this list. I went through my phone and my photo archives from around the state looking at things that have happened. And again, with this question in mind about what is it we want to avoid with hurricanes and tropical storms. And I think structural damage to our homes and businesses is probably first and foremost. A power outage is bad. You might have a few hot, sleepless nights, but good grief, if you've lost your roof or your home, that's a terrible thing. This picture here on the left was taken, I believe, in the aftermath of Hurricane Michael. We were up in Tallahassee visiting my son, and he wanted to go out west into the Panhandle more, and we came across this photo here on the left. The photo on the right is a collapsed Washingtonia palm right in my neighborhood in Weston, Florida, here in Broward County. And as you can see, the palm tree, not tremendous damage, but still, I'm sure that broke some roof tiles, possibly a light fixture, and necessary significant cleanup costs. Loss of tree canopy, that's also a big concern because, especially as the climate is warming, we know trees do so much good in terms of shading, cooling our communities, sequestering carbon dioxide, providing oxygen, wildlife habitat. I could go on and on. Um, this is a picture of me on that same trip into the Panhandle after Michael. And you can see this natural area has sustained a lot of tree damage. The photo on the right is my HOA in Weston after Hurricane Wilma, October 25th, 2005. And those are our street trees. So, South Florida has a high water table. Excuse me, we often find as a result our tree roots don't go down deep like they might have in, farther north in the state or even into, I'm originally from the Midwest. We don't have tap roots on our trees down here, and so the roots tend to go out. They go under valley gutters and roadways and under sidewalks, and they're quite a problem, quite frankly. And this was probably a good example of wrong tree, wrong place to plant a large tropical hammock tree like mahogany in a very small, roadway area. Um, Blocked roadways, I think I also mentioned, always a concern. A couple of pictures from Weston, Florida, here where I live. And you can see that it's pretty difficult to get vehicles through in these kinds of situations. Another couple pictures of this is actually flooding and storm surge damage in the Panhandle after Michael. Tremendous damage. Those of you that don't live near the coast probably wouldn't see this kind of impact, but those of you who do conceivably could. This was pretty eye-opening for me, seeing such colossal damage due to storm surge. And I mentioned earlier down power lines and power outages. These photos are courtesy of Florida Power and Light. Boy, there's a lot to know about avoiding down power lines. We had a real tragedy in my community after one of our hurricanes. There was a flooded roadway and there were power lines down. And the family was out walking, I guess, in the aftermath of the storm, as people frequently do. They come out to look around and, oh my God, what happened? And can you believe this? And so the dog was with them. The dog got loose and ran into the puddle. And the puddle, of course, the dog became electrocuted, and the child ran after the dog. and the mom ran after the child. And I need not tell you, what else happened. It was a very, very horrific outcome. So, and yeah, you never know, and with debris and whatnot. So just you have to be super careful. Um, it's also important with down fences. There may be rusty nails. Make sure you've had your tetanus shots up to date if you're going to be doing any kind of cleanup work. We also will sometimes find snakes and alligators and things in flooded areas. So, I don't want to focus too much on the gloom and doom, but I'm just saying you really need to use common sense and be careful when you're out and about in the aftermath of a storm. And then kind of the other big issue then is the cleanup and the costs associated with that, which, as I mentioned before, can really bankrupt a homeowner association's budget for the year. And that's why we typically end up seeing special assessments. So know though that some of this could have been prevented had we maybe managed things better and in a timely manner and avoided some of those costs. And so I'll talk a little bit about how my HOA responded to Wilma and then how we had a much better outcome following Hurricane Irma in 2017. Two storms that were somewhat different in character, but both probably strong Cat 1, weak Cat 2 storms, so relatively similar in terms of strength. Um, so preparation is the key, and I think that's the main message I want to send out today. We need to be prepared, and it is now the 16th of June, so it is not too early to be thinking about preparing. Um, so as I looked around my neighborhood, I thought to myself, well, let's see how prepared we are for storm season. This is a backyard of my neighbor next door. It's a lovely large lot for Weston. They've got quite a few things in the backyard. I'm sure if you look closely, you'll see some propane tanks, a little outdoor plastic storage bin. Looks like it's a folded closed umbrella, beach umbrella. There's some toys out there in the pool area. Um, all this stuff needs to be secured in the advance of storm because, again, these could become airborne. They could become projectiles. Excuse me. Also, stacked roof tiles. This is a common practice, which really is a no-no. I like to keep my unused roof tiles after a roofing job in the garage. It keeps them a lot cleaner. Looking at these outside my neighbor's house, I'm thinking, I'm not even sure I would want to reuse those, let alone, deal with the risk of them becoming a projectile. Also, things that the maintenance folks use to clean the pool or maybe the resident themselves. Um, as you can see, there's some netting here and some other pool tools being stored on the fence. Most of these fences, by the way, came down completely flattened during Hurricane Irma. And it was interesting because I never realized when all the backyards are contiguous and visible, it's really a huge green space. People actually interact with one another a lot more. But within 6 months, all these fences went back up and we were back to same old, same old. um, if you've planted trees in the last couple of years, they may still have stakes and braces and rope and black strap and different kinds of ties on them to keep them standing up. Just know that these items can damage tree trunks over time by pinching the trunk and actually can increase the risk of breakage. We only really want to keep the artificial supports on until the tree has established itself enough that it can remain upright for the most part. Um, under normal type conditions. The problem is when these things become embedded into the trunk and then the wind blows, this is frequently a site where the tree will literally break off. So I would say if you've planted trees in the last 6 to 9 months, you're probably okay at this point to leave them on unless they're pinching the trunk. But if you've had them on more than a year, those things should come off. If you determine the tree is still not stable, perhaps think about restaking it, retying it. Another thing that comes to mind is irrigation. So know that the soil has some tensile strength and in terms of holding the root ball in place. And so as the soil becomes increasingly saturated, we lose some of that strength. And it never surprises me to see in advance of the storm, people irrigating their properties. So I would say if you're in a cone, it's a good thing to turn your irrigation off. Um, we probably over irrigate most of our properties more than we should. And remember, roots will go down and go deep as much as they can in search of water if the root system is not continually inundated. So um, if there's tropical weather forecast, I shut my system down completely uh, several days in advance. Okay. And last but not least, making sure that all of your shutters and structural protection devices, whatever that may be, are secure and tight. This is my older son, Nathan. Before we had shutters for our front, I should say the accordion type. Um, this is the kind of shutters we were using. Just make sure they're really good and secure, and don't store them outside. Okay, last but not least, don't decide to prune the trees while you're in the cone. This kind of work needs to be done well in advance. In fact, my HOA, I always encourage them to do tree pruning after the holidays in January and February when temperatures are much cooler. I think you get better work out of people and costs are lower. Try to get a trimming job this time of year, and you're going to have to get in line and probably pay top dollar. The reason why we recommend not pruning trees in advance of the storm is you may not get a pickup. And so now you've added to the list of things that can become projectiles. Okay, so we want to do the pruning well in advance of the storm. So now we're going to turn our attention a little bit more and drill down into tree care. So, and also thinking about the facts which can affect whether a tree is going to fail or not. And so there's a whole long list of things here. Of course, the intensity of the storm, the type of tree species, some of them are more brittle than others, the age of the tree, the size, its health, its condition, past abuses that it might have sustained, its branching architecture, structure, root balls. Again, if the tree got planted with a compromised root system, maybe it came out of the container it had been in too long and the roots are all circling. Um, that, by the way, would render a tree a cull, meaning it would not pass an inspection on a permitted job site. Um, Soil factors, is the soil there very compacted with poor drainage? Do you have available mature rooting space? That's the problem in my homeowners association with those mahogany trees. You're planting a tree that's going to get a trunk 2 to 3 feet in diameter with a massive canopy in a 5 to 6 foot wide area. It just doesn't work. That's right tree, right place, plain and simple. Also, the placement of the trees in the landscape, their proximity to buildings and power lines and utilities and things like that. All of this stuff needs to be thought through, preferably early on at the time of design before we actually install anything. Common impacts of storms on trees. These are pictures we've taken around the state. A lot of times it's uprooting. It could be the trunk snaps off. Obviously, limb failure is a very common consequence of storms, canopy loss, and lean. I'm looking at that picture in the lower left and thinking, why is that tree leaning? Well, look at where it's planted, right next to concrete and asphalt and a valley gutter. So really, really reduced ability for that tree to root adequately for the canopy it's trying to hold up. Storm intensity matters too. So, you know, we teach pruning preparedness and we focus on the structure of the trees, the developmental aspects of pruning, not just clearance, okay? But if you're going to get a cat 4, a cat 5, I don't think at that point the pruning is going to matter all that much. But the reality is most of our storms tend to be cat 1 and cat 2, and the pruning can make a huge difference. Um, and of course, the intensity of the storm, as the slide shows, changes over time. Sometimes these things come blow up all of a sudden, like Michael. I think it went from a 1 to a Cat 4 overnight in the Gulf. Other times they will approach land and maybe there's wind shear, or if it's coming across Hispaniola or Cuba, Jamaica, it's gonna get some wind shear. It may weaken. We just don't know. And so, whether the Cat 4 weakens to a Cat 1 or a Cat 2, which often happens as they cross the panhandle, it's anybody's guess. But what I'm telling you is, for the most part, when we talk about preparedness pruning, we're really focusing on trying to get the trees through Cat 1, Cat 2 type storms, which is the majority of them. Um, and another benefit would be reducing the amount of waste and debris that is generated from job sites. These are just pictures taken from past storms. Um, Mountains and mountains of debris. The species make a difference. So yes and no. We know that there are certain tree species which tend to be more brittle than others. Mahogany is one good example in South Florida. Magnolias do really well. Cypress trees do really well. Think about the architecture. They have very large dominant trunks with small diameter limbs attached to them, as opposed to some of our call them slingshot trees, like mahogany, for example. It'll have a trunk and then maybe at 3, 4, 5, 6 feet, it'll fork into 2, 3, 4. I've seen as many as 7 different major branches all invested at one point of attachment on that trunk. Those trees are very susceptible to breakage. If one of the limbs fails, now you've got a wound in the vicinity of where the other limbs are attached. So that scenario can be prevented with good pruning, good developmental pruning. So are older trees and larger trees more of a concern? Well, yeah. I mean, when you think about the fact that if they're coming down, as this slide shows, that is a bad situation. I don't like to leave tree limbs uh, over my roof line. And I like to keep large maturing trees probably 30 feet away from a building. But at the same time, we can put smaller maturing trees closer to the house, closer to the building. We can do some slender trunk palms with no problem. But yeah, so many times, properties is just it's a right tree, right place issue. And couple that with good pruning, good developmental pruning, and I think you're going to have a very sustainable landscape. Past abuses. So I want you to know that topping trees is considered a poor practice. It's prohibited in many of our communities. Some of our communities actually issue violations to homeowners and tree services that do this kind of pruning. Does it make the tree safer in the short term? Absolutely. You reduce the lever arm, if you will, the length of those limbs. And so this ficus tree, which is horrendously hat-racked, stubbed off, is going to produce a proliferation of sprouts below the wound, below the cut. And so I have no question in my mind this tree would get through the hurricane this year with no problem. But what happens in the aftermath, in the years, months and years that follow, these sprouts grow out. Imagine, they're now very dense, attached to potentially decaying wood, because a lot of times these large diameter cuts do not close over. And then you get these sprouts getting 10, 15, 20 feet of length on them, crowded together, attached to compromised woods, and you have a very unstable situation. The photo on the right shows flush cuts, exposing trunk tissue, I should say. These wounds have opened up portals for decay organisms, termites. We have tree termites in South Florida now. And so we like to make as small a cut on as possible when we're removing limbs back to the trunk. But again, if we're doing this in a timely manner, I actually recommend pruning trees every year or every other year, not waiting 4 and 5 years between pruning jobs, just to help, if it's a temporary limb, let's keep it small. Here's just a few other examples of decaying. If you see mushrooms on your tree like that, Typically, in this case, it's an old stub cut. It's decaying on the inside. These are kinds of things that need to be looked at. So go out and scope out your trees. The tree on the right has a huge hollow in it and certainly is not going to be very wind-worthy, if you will. So maybe a reduction cut there to remove that part back to some live, healthy tissue would be in order. But again, proper pruning in advance of the storm is what is key. This is a diagram from Dr. Ed Gilman, our UF IFAS Extension arborist, now retired, but still very active in the industry. From his website, if you Google his name, Ed Gilman, Gilman, landscape plants, you'll come upon this wonderful website with all kinds of fact sheets and handouts and slides and recommendations for everything that is tree related, even managing conflicts with sidewalks and infrastructure. As the model shows, we have a tree on the left before pruning that has 3 upright limbs, A, B, and C. We're going to try to select a dominant leader, B, probably the one in the middle, which has good branching potential. And we're going to shorten or subordinate is the term we use, A and C by pruning them back. And that's what the dotted line shows, pruning A and C back to a lower, smaller lateral branch. The benefit of that then becomes the leader, B, gets more light and develops, gets larger, spreads out, and shades out A and C. And the research is very conclusive that a tree with a single dominant trunk and well-spaced, smaller diameter branches can weather high wind events in good fashion. And so the picture on the right, taken from my HOA, is a live oak tree that really was a big bush when we started the pruning program here. And what you're looking at, the large upright limb in the middle would be B, and A and C are on the sides. And you can see how over time we have stair-stepped them down with reduction cuts, really turning their upright nature into more of a horizontal direction. And in that respect, developed B, the leader. You can see the difference in the diameter of the trunks, if you will. B has a very big fat trunk now because it's gotten light. We got rid of that competition that was provided by A and C. So this is the essence of structural pruning, developmental pruning. And I just can't emphasize enough. This is what we teach in the classes time and time again. Pruning is more than just clearing low limbs. Anybody can do that. It takes a person with a view, a vision, and skill to be able to turn a tree into what we see here today. And it's actually not even done. It's not completed, but I think this tree probably was pruned 4 or 5 times in probably 15 years to get it to this point. So I want to just show you the difference in a removal cut, which is shown on the top, where, as the dotted lines indicate, we're removing low limbs back to that leader, that B, if you will, that main trunk. And the reduction cut, which is a different cut, where we remove the larger limb back to a smaller, lower lateral limb, which is what is developmental pruning, structural pruning, where we use the reduction cut to cut A and C back to B. I hope that's clear. 2 different cuts, and this is just fundamental to pruning. And if you're going to be making a removal cut, again, we don't want to make flush cuts. Flush cuts expose trunk tissue to the elements and incite decay. We make a cut just outside that branch collar, which is the swelling where the branch is attached to the trunk. Okay? And we make that cut, that removal cut, in 3 steps. As you can see in the little diagram, the first cut is an undercut. This is a little bit out from the branch collar, which again is the swelling, if you will, on the trunk. It's basically branch tissue that has been strengthened by overlapping trunk tissue. The second cut is a little farther out on the limb and causes the limb to fall to the ground, tearing back to the undercut. We don't want to cause a trunk tear, right? So the final cut then, now that we've got that weight of the limb off of the tree, we make that final cut right outside the branch collar, leaving that swelling, if you will, on the trunk intact. When I was in college many years ago, we actually recommended flush cutting and basically using pruning paint and sealing over those wounds. Research has debunked that practice as unnecessary and potentially problematic. So at this point in time, we leave the branch collar on, we make a smaller diameter cut, and we don't even bother with the pruning paint. Not that it does any damage, but it's just not necessary. So anyway, I'm going to, in the interest of time, move on. I want to show you a couple pictures of some poor pruning. This picture on the left here was taken on the Palmetto Expressway in Miami, a little ways from here, and it shows you 3 live oak trees that have been improperly pruned. Why? Because too much lower canopy has been removed. The density is up at the top where the wind speeds are highest, and the removal of that foliage in the lower part of the canopy, and I understand there's a need for clearance, 100%, but this is kind of the other extreme. We call this lion tailing. If you think about what a lion's tail looks like, this is kind of what's done when we strip out too much of the mid canopy foliage and neglect anything up in the top of the tree. If you think back to the diagram I showed you with A, B, and C, you know, all of these trunks, if you will, are basically about the same diameter, competing with one another, and these trees are highly at risk of breakage. So kind of the goal here would be to create a tree as you see here on the right. This is one of the mahogany trees in my homeowners association. Look at how it has a very strong dominant trunk and leader, and it has well-spaced, smaller diameter scaffold branches. And so my rule of thumb came from an old American National Standards Institute guideline, is that when you're done with the pruning, half of the foliage on the tree should be in the lower 2/3 of the tree, which means the other half of the foliage on the tree should be in the upper 1/3. And I think that this tree here, if you look at it, it should be very pleasing to the eye and much in better form than these trees, which were really done very improperly. Some cities will send violations on this type of pruning. Okay, and then I want to bring up this issue of codominance. Codominance essentially is when you have multiple trunks, as was the case with the tree in the diagram A, B, and C. And a lot of times these trunks where they meet develop what's called bark inclusions. If you look at the slide on the left, you see that bark, that dark spot inside the wound. That's basically just bark that was trapped or pinched between 2 large diameter trunks. And this is a common risk factor for breakage. If you have codominant, meaning roughly equal size diameter trunks, and that they have bark pinched inside the crotch. It's a common site for failure. And that's what happened in my HOA during Hurricane Wilma. And there's an oak here, an oak tree. Some people have come to me and said, yeah, Mike, mahogany trees are brittle. We expect they're going to break up, but live oaks, they're really tough. Well, yes and no, but I've seen many live oaks also split apart, as you see on the right. And if you look, you can see the bark inclusion right at the top of the crotch. It's that kind of reddish, tannish bark that you see that's at the top of the break. That's a bark inclusion. So This would be another thing to be looking at when you're looking at your trees. Do you have multiple trunks? Do you have codominancy? Do you have bark pinched inside the crotch between these competing leaders? And if so, the recommendation would be then to shorten, select one to be your dominant, and shorten, get some of the weight off of the others that are going to be weakly attached. And here's a crack in a live oak that hasn't failed yet. So structural pruning, this is the thing I really, really push in terms of hurricane preparedness. If we want to have a sustainable urban compatible tree canopy, it's a process of shortening or removing one or more codominant leaders by pruning the terminal, typically upright or end portion of a limb to slow the growth rate so other portions of the tree, the leader, B, if you will, can grow and outcompete the competition. And I want you to know, you typically cannot achieve this with one round of pruning. It's going to take 3, 4 visits, maybe over as many as 5 to 10 years, but you can do it. And my HOA did that on 700 of our street trees, mahoganies, that survived Hurricane Wilma. We lost 400. We had 700 left, so we had a total of 1,100 street trees. Did this pruning probably 3 to 4 times on every tree over a period of probably 10 to 12 years. Had the hurricane in 2017, which was the test, and instead of losing 36% of our street trees, we only lost 2%. And guess what? No special assessment, not much cleanup. So just kind of want to breeze through a few more slides here. This is what I'm talking about, folks. When you get these multiple trunks, you can see this Hong Kong orchid on the left has already had a couple of limbs it has shed. The gumbo limbo on the right, the tree to the this is right near my office. Look at all the codominant limbs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And they're all attached at the same point. So as these begin to break out, you can see that bark inclusions where they're like the seams where they meet it, down toward the bottom. This is a real cluster of branches of codominant limbs. And I am just waiting to see this thing fail. The tree next to it, or a couple trees over, I just noticed yesterday, failed. Half of it's on the ground in a parking lot. Hasn't even been cleaned up yet. So be aware of bark inclusions, be aware of codominance. I know there's a lot of jargon here, but these are the terms we use. And if you are interviewing a tree service, ask them about how they manage codominance and bark inclusions. And if they're worth anything, they're going to be able to give you a good answer and say, oh, well, we address that with pruning by doing structural pruning. And if you've got a tree service that comes in and they're just, yeah, I got a crew, we got some power pruners, we're just going to limb it up for you. We'll do it real quick and it'll be cheap. That's no bargain, guys. That's no bargain because, when these things start breaking apart, it's going to hit you in the pocketbook. Just another, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I think hopefully it's pretty clear, but there's an oak tree on the right there. The arrow is pointing to a bark inclusion. We have half a tree now. What happened to the other half of it? Well, it probably fell into the bushes, maybe into the parking lot. Again, I can't emphasize enough. If you've got targets meaning things that can be damaged if a tree fails. So it could be cars, utilities, structures, homes, roof lines, whatever. Those are the ones you got to be on top of. If it's a tree out in the back 40, who cares? So this happened. This one failed in the wintertime. This is up in Coral Springs. We were doing a class up there, and the owner of the property says, Mike, go around the corner. He says, I can't believe it, but it's half a live oak tree failed the other day. And it was January. So, gravity never takes a break. You get enough decay in a tree and it may just come down someday. So, just a few pictures of some developmental pruning that I've done in my homeowners association to try to achieve this great architecture, this wind resilient architecture. I sometimes get the question, well, Mike, nobody does this in the forest. So how do we have forests, in hurricane-prone areas? This is a slide from actually Southwest Georgia. It's Providence Canyon State Park. It could be mahogany hammock down in the Everglades National Park, but the point here is in the woods where these trees evolved. There's a lot of competition for light. These trees are growing in very close proximity to one another, and it's very unlike our urban suburban type situation where trees are planted on 40-foot centers or they're up on berms and there's plenty of sunlight and sometimes they get irrigated or they might get fertilized because of the grass around them. And that's when they grow these crazy codominant multiple trunk type forms. You don't get that in the woods. There's a high percentage of naturally occurring single leaders, primarily because the codominance is inhibited by shading. Shading is because there's not much light. And so they're all racing to try to occupy that little void to get some light. I do have to say hats off to our commercial growers in the state of Florida who have done a great job, I think, in the last 20 years, trying to develop good, straight, you know, well-pruned canopies. The problem is we take a tree like this with a beautiful leader and we plant it out in the HOA or in a commercial property, and look what happens without any follow-up pruning. I hope you all can see. You got lots of codominance going on there. We got lots of targets. We got a parking lot. We got a roadway. That tree at some point, if we get a good cat 1, cat 2 coming through, at some point that thing is going to split right down the middle. So again, this is the recipe, if you will. Maintain your trees with good structural developmental pruning. And this is right off of Dr. Ed Gilman's website. I'm giving him credit there at the bottom of the slide. You can pull this off of the internet. Reduction cut. And then just to show you, we played around with this out back behind on our research campus here. A little mahogany that was donated to the program. On the left, you can see it has that double trunk type situation right where the ties are. And by the way, this is Wellington tape. And again, 6 to 9 months, maybe 12 months max, take it off before it starts to bite into the trunk. So we chose the left-hand side to be our leader and subordinated it with pruning. You can see the reduction cut on the right in the photo. There on the right side, reduction cut, and we developed a nice canopy on that tree as a result of that cut. And so this practice can be done on larger trees too. I see I'm getting down to the wire here on time, so I'm going to kind of try to hurry through this. This is a good friend, board certified master arborist, Jonathan Frank with Bartlett Tree Experts, making a reduction cut on a codominant upright oak limb in one of our county parks here in Broward. Powerful cut. So he is stair-stepping down this right half side of the tree to try to do some developmental pruning on it. Again, my thoughts on this live oak tree. Again, it's a slingshot type structure. It's got 2 codominants, probably got a bark inclusion developing there at the base. I would come in, I would choose to develop the leader on the right as my main tree, and I would use some reduction cuts on the leader on the left to kind of rein it back, eventually making a cut down below. As you can see here, this is a different slide, obviously, but on this mahogany on the right, we've actually eliminated the codominant completely after several rounds of pruning. Mr. Hoyt in the picture here on the left is pointing to a bark inclusion. And right above him is, in the background, another reduction cut. So I try to make this as clear as possible. It's not rocket science. There's a really well executed cut on the right here to remove that remaining smaller now codominant limb. Try to get out the bark inclusion. So I put this into practice on the tree in front of my house, and as you can see, my swale mahogany, we call it swales, it's a tree lawn, the parkway, the area between the sidewalk and the street, had 4 leaders back in 2001, before I had a good digital camera. That's why it's so pixelated. In 3 years, I had 2 of the 4 gone, And look at how small the leader on the right is compared to the one that I chose to develop on the left. This is 2004. The reduction in size is due to the fact I've been pruning on the right part of this tree. And in 2007, so 6 years later, I finally had a single dominant trunk. And this tree is in fabulous form. It actually served as the guinea pig, if you will, the example to the rest of the community of what I thought we needed to do, and they did it. So I'm going to end on this one. Which of these two mahogany trees do you think will survive a Cat 1, Cat 2 storm this coming storm season? The low bid plaza tree in the Publix parking lot behind my house, or the structure pruned swale tree, street tree, if you will, now completed. I can tell you that tree has been through Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Wilma, and at most it lost one-inch diameter branch. That, my folks, is one of the keys to preparing your tree canopy for storm season. All right, because we don't want this to happen. So where to prioritize structural pruning? Parking lot islands, playgrounds, picnic areas, campgrounds, buildings, homes, dog parks, lots of places where targets exist. Yes, it's a little more money. You've got to hire somebody who knows what they're doing, not the cheapest guy on the block. And it's like what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. And so if you care about trees and you care about safety and you want to minimize the liability from storm damage to your trees, you need to do the proper kind of pruning. Okay, I'm going to just skip over these. This is just some more shots of tree failure. I don't want to take too much time, but yeah, look at that. So, oh, this is a good one. This oak tree on the right. This is a very wet park and probably not a great place to plant big canopy trees. And I am sure the irrigation ran right before the storm because that thing was just it became like a lake. So anyway, uh, just kind of trying to wrap this up, guys. Palms, let me hit on palms really quickly because so many guys over prune their palms. Oh my God. The growing point, the bud is at the base of the head of the palm. And we need to have a lot of fronds there to protect the bud from being damaged, or the tree can be killed if the bud is destroyed. So why do we prune everything so hard and end up with 3 or 4 fronds on a tree before a storm? It doesn't make any sense. It's just not good pruning. It stresses the tree. The code, by the way, is any frond that's green on a palm tree should be allowed to remain above the horizontal. Essentially, if you think about the position of the hands on a clock being 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock, anything that's at that point or above, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 11 o'clock, whatever, those green fronds need to stay on the palm tree. They help feed it, they help sustain it, and they protect the bud. And these bozos that are out there, and I just saw some yesterday right around the corner from my office, uh, Space Coast Credit Union. Oh my God, there's like 2 or 3 fronds left on all their palm trees. Terrible stuff. Weed eaters, and then yeah, check out the weed eaters. Don't let the guys weed eat the trunks of your trees. If they cut to the cambium, the tree is toast. And we already talked about this, the straps. This tree is ripe to break off. What a shame. So, and then mulch, just don't over mulch your trees. It's not a good practice. 2 to 3 inches max, no more, and never in contact with the trunk. All right. These are just pictures of my HOA after Hurricane Wilma before we did structural pruning. And then this was the damage that was associated with Hurricane Irma. 10 years after structural pruning, very minimal damage. Huge difference. No pruning, good pruning. No pruning, good pruning. Invest in your trees. All right. And then I just had a couple real quick pictures on aftermath. If you have large trees that have gone down, it's probably not a good practice to set them back up because so much of the root mass will have been compromised and you've got to put them stakes and braces back on them. And I asked Dr. Ed one day, I said, Ed, is it worth putting a tree back up if it's any more than 5 or 6 inches in diameter, DBH, diameter of breast height? He said, probably not, Mike. So, some resources that you might want to look into, the Illustrated Guide to Pruning, Dr. Ed Gilman, his third edition. There's his website at the bottom. Our industry guys should be familiar with the American National Standards Institute. Not something a homeowner might want to invest in, but you might ask your tree service before they give you a bid. Do you follow ANSI standards, ANSI, American National Standards Institute guidelines? If they look at you like they've never heard about it, tell them no, thank you. All right, so that's it. I'll take some questions at this point. Again, just Google Ed Gilman landscape plants and you will see a wealth of information online. Thank you so much, and we'll take some questions now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all that information. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to process. We have a few questions over here. And we'll start with one that maybe is a little easier. What is the best practice for structural trimming of young trees, i.e., less than 2 years old?
I would say frequent. Just try to maintain a size ratio such that no limb, no codominant, no anything on the tree is more than half the diameter of what it's attached to. So when we think about the size of the trunk, which becomes the leader, any limbs, particularly upright growing limbs that could compete with the leader, should be maintained such that they do not get any more than half the diameter of the main leader, the main trunk, at the point where they're attached. So when we talk about what are the branches to prune, I always say, okay, who's more than half the diameter of the trunk? And those are the ones that we typically hit on, whether it's a young tree or it's an older tree.
Okay. Um, we have we have a massive live oak, probably a few hundred years old, in my backyard in coastal Volusia. It looks strong and healthy, but doesn't need trimming. The lowest limbs are about 25 feet from the ground.
Okay. That would be difficult to do from the ground. When we do our classes, if I can't make a good, well executed cut from the ground, I am going to either use a climber or tell people we need a bucket truck, which we don't have. So when the limbs get up high like that, yeah, you need some type of a lift. You need, or a climber, somebody who can get up there. And I would say if you don't have bark inclusions, I'm less concerned about failure. If you have heavy upright limbs with bark inclusions, those should be moved up in terms of prioritization. And at that point on a big tree, you're never going to make it into a perfect single leader tree. But what you can do is use some reduction cuts to reduce some of the weight of the canopy that's attached to those upright limbs. And by shortening them, taking off some of the canopy, you not only slow them down, but you also reduce the strain on the point of attachment. Okay. Um, and by the way, this is obviously much easier to do on younger trees, but the benefit of even shortening the limb, the pruning should occur toward the outer part of the canopy. And unfortunately, too many of our tree services focus on the inside and they do not rein in that lever arm, that the length of that limb, the longer it gets, the farther out it gets from the point of attachment, the more strain that's placed on that union. Okay.
Next, we have if your palms have been over pruned, and now I'm concerned about their health. Well, how would I best assess their health? I live in South Beach and I'm having a hard time finding an arborist. How
Mm.
much should I pay for an arborist to come evaluate about 8 palms?
Okay, a couple things to unpack there. First of all, to find an arborist, there's different ways to do it, but the ISA, International Society of Arborists, Arboriculture, I should say, has a website, and it's you can just Google ISA, International Society of Arboriculture, and there's a find an arborist option on their menu, and you can find a list of who they have certified. Now, I'd be a liar if I told you everybody who holds an ISA certification is a great arborist, because some of them are and some of them aren't. But typically, they're going to be more knowledgeable because they had to pass a 200 question exam. I've done it, and it's lengthy, and so at least they should know better. The other thing is I always like ask for references, or if I see good tree work going on, I might stop and get their card, or I might ask that homeowner, that property manager, who do you use? Um, in terms of doing an evaluation, there's a number of consultants in the area, and arborists that would do such work in South Florida. I know many of them personally. I don't really want to get into giving you names on on a call like this, but I would suggest using the ISA, International Society of Arboriculture's website. In terms of recovering from over pruning with palms, fertilize, fertilize, fertilize. We recommend fertilizing palms 3 to 4 times a year with a palm special 8212. You can purchase it at some of the folks like Site One Landscaping, some other the other vendors. There's a place Diamond R down in Homestead that carries 8212. Just ask your landscaper, your tree service, if they know of a place that you can get it, or they can get it for you. But we fertilize a palm basically by broadcasting the fertilizer out to the drip line, not just putting a little concentrated trunk or a lit ring around the trunk that doesn't do anything. Those roots are out there. Um, and so fertilize it heavy and back off on the pruning and let that palm recover.
Okay, next we have a question. As I have a feeling you probably get this a lot, with a concern about a neighbor's pine tree. And they are afraid that it might impact the home if it comes down. And they already lost their home to Andrew. So
Hmm.
do they have any, and don't want anything like that to happen again. So are there any recourses for that? And what do you do if you're worried about a neighbor's tree?
Okay, a lot here to unpack as well. So first of all, pines, um, a lot of times in the aftermath of a storm, sometimes as much as 6 months after the storm, we begin to see pines declining. We have a lot of pines that are declining in South Florida for a lot of reasons. Much of it is over irrigation. They really, once they're established, do not need to be fertilized. The compaction from mowing equipment, damage from weed eaters. We also have this new tree termite down here, which really likes pine trees. There's a lot of things going on with pines, but they're their damage often, for whatever reason, doesn't really show up immediately. I mean, sometimes, yeah, the trees can blow over or they can break up, but if you see the pine that's got an overabundance of yellow or brown needles, if you see decay, or you see, sticky, gummy residues coming out of the trunk, or you see signs of borers, those are all risk factors for failure. Aside from that, if the pine looks healthy, I wouldn't be overly concerned. If you are objecting to tree limbs hanging over the property line from your neighbors, know that Florida law does provide for you to basically remove those limbs, or shorten them, I should say, up to the property line. There's a clause in there, something about, so as long as you don't create an hazardous condition, which I suppose if the tree was planted right on a property line and you cut every limb off, you could cause it to become unbalanced. But there's nothing, you know, against removing or shortening some limbs that overhang your property. If the tree has lean or any of the defects that I mentioned before, I would first start by talking to my neighbor. That's always kind of a good thing, because and I have had some good neighbors and some not so good neighbors, but most of the time you can get some. At least they would agree to let you prune it, or hopefully they would hire somebody who would come in and do a good job. It runs the whole gamut. One thing I want to caution you about, though, is roots, incursions with roots. Florida law is less supportive of cutting roots on your property from a neighbor's tree. And there again, I'd say you don't want to cause a situation where the tree could become unstable. We can prune smaller diameter roots, maybe back up to about 2 inches in diameter. But if you're getting 4 and 6 inches, that's going to probably cause decay, which will have a whole host of other problems.
I I'm just going to mention one more thing before we finish up with this webinar. We all had some great questions, and I think probably you might have more that your local county extension agent might be able to help you with. I'm thinking someone asked a question about a specific tree in their area, and sorry, we don't know where you are, but you know who would know the answer to that is your local county extension agent. So we always try to point people to their local extension office where we have experts on trees in almost every office in in every county in Florida. So I put that in the chat box. If you want to go look at that link there to find your local county extension agent who can give you on the ground, advice. They can tell you what kind of tree you have and point you to some resources for management for those trees. And
I
so
would
that,
also like to point out I could make myself available if folks wanted to email me directly at
okay, great.
M as in Mike, ORF as in Frank at UFL.edu. MORF at UFL.edu.
That's really great. Thank you for that. And someone else asked if this will be available later. We'll have to see about sending out the PowerPoint, which is a possibility, but you can always refer to this PowerPoint on our YouTube channel, the Florida Friendly Landscaping YouTube channel, and we put all of our webinars up there after they've been recorded. So that was really wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge. And
My pleasure.
yeah, and we'll see everybody at next month's webinar.
Thank you, folks. Practice hurricane preparedness.